Hello. So looking here at two specific releases by U2, both from the early mid 90s. Zooropa, which is from 1993, and Passengers, which is I think 95. Now I have the whole, or the almost the whole U2 discography, both some secondhand, some new. But the reason I picked these two out specifically to look at them together is because they represent a time that for me is perhaps my favorite period of U2. U2 is a band that has a lot of different things associated with it. A lot of people don't like U2 because they're such a huge band and they're so everywhere, and they have been everywhere my entire lifetime and most of my life and still today. Their music is just kind of it's almost part of the cultural fabric of most Western countries. When something becomes that big, people kind of push against it, especially if they feel that whatever that cultural art might be, if they feel it's not authentic enough or it's not good enough. So for as many people that love U2, there is just as, or maybe there are still many, maybe not just as many, but many people who loathe them, and they also don't like Bono's humanitarian and slightly self-righteous way of presenting himself through the years. I guess that's a separate thing. But if we can kind of cut their career into their early work up to about, I guess, Unforgettable Fire, Joshua Tree, where they're starting to kind of build and becoming mainstream. And I guess in some ways, Joshua Tree was kind of their first apex, where they became really huge in America as well as in Europe. And then I guess you would say that Achtung Baby was their second apex. And then I didn't include Achtung Baby with these two because I think Achtung Baby stands alone. It's a great album, but I kind of put it as a turning point in their career, but also as a thing that's separate from anything else. Then the 90s, these two, and then I guess pop. You could include pop with these, but I think pop is a little bit out the other side. And maybe it's just me personally, my own personal experience and feeling and history where I don't put pop with these two. And then from All That You Can't Leave Behind, is that what it's called? From their 2000, I think that was 2000, 2001 on, then it's their later career. And I think that would go through to at least the 2000, whenever they put they released their album onto the iPhone, onto people's iPods without asking them, onto their iTunes without asking them. I think that was 2014-ish. Songs of Innocence, and they've done songs of blah blah. Those ones I haven't heard a song from them. I haven't heard it, and that's not because I've avoided it. It's just there's so much music to listen to, and it kind of I'd put that as their end current period. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that I tie these two together, and I mean that in a positive way because for a lot of people, these two, especially Passengers, a lot of people don't even know Passengers is really a U2 release. I know it's not in a technical sense, but it is really. And Zooropa is kind of seen as almost like a stopgap album between Achtung Baby and Pop. Um, and from reading what the band say, they kind of regard Zooropa a bit as that as well. They don't. I don't. Maybe these are. Sometimes that people's ideas change over time, and I don't know what they feel now in 2023. But some of the interviews I have read, Bono in particular doesn't really rate the album. He feels that it doesn't stand up with the others, and yeah. But anyway, this came out in 1993, and it was basically the idea was they wrote this as they were touring. They were touring the Zoo TV tour for Achtung Baby, which is a massive world tour, massive in every sense. and they as they were sound checking around the world, and I guess in hotels, but also in periods between dates. They would go into the studio and they were kind of collating ideas for songs, rough outlines of songs. And then after that period, they went into the studio and recorded this album. And I think it's an excellent album, and it's one of my favorite U2 albums. This period, from Achtung Baby up to Passengers and Pop, yeah, I'm a little bit more iffy on, but that was for me the genuinely interesting period of U2. Their other stuff's good. Later, the 2000 stuff I don't really like. All that you can't leave behind and Vertigo and whatever the other ones are. I don't really like them. They're not bad, but it's just not for me. But this period here, I don't know. There's something about it, about the atmosphere, the imagery they use, the production. They use Brian Eno. Of course, they've been using Brian Eno before this, but together with Flood. Flood is someone, whenever I see his name come up, it's always with albums I like. And that might just be coincidence, but I think he makes this almost like a dry production sound or mix or whatever. I don't know enough about music production to quantify it more than that, but there's something about the mix or the sound of this album, or the music in the album and how it's presented, that appeals to me. The first song, Zooropa, the title, the same as the album title, is a great song. Builds up over a long time. Other songs I like on this, uh, Numb, that's a good song. That was the first song I ever heard of this. The one they did a remix of it. And I remember seeing the video for that. That impressed me. It was kind of like they took parts and looped it. Not the one with Edge getting tangled up. That video. There's another one which was they used like video collage and hard to explain. Lemon, I really like that song. I particularly like the live version they did from around this time. Um, Stay, far away, so close, which is another single I like. Some days are better than others. The first time. The last song, The Wanderer, they did with Johnny Cash. Just a quick look at just kind of the. I guess it's a very 90s look, but it's also matches, I think, what they were trying to go for. You can see the Zoo TV influence. So there's Lemon, which went, of course, the imagery went into Pop as well with their stage show. It could almost be a Nine Inch Nails booklet. It's a young Johnny Cash or a younger Johnny Cash. So yeah, it's an album that I think is unfairly judged. It actually had very good critical acclaim, and it went number one in almost every market which they usually do number one. But I don't think it's considered up there with their great albums. Passengers is something a little bit different completely. This is where they wanted to release something, but they kind of wanted to do it under another name. And the idea with this album is they were making soundtracks to different movies. I think most of the movies that are made up. I think one or two of them are real movies, but so they created a movie like from the film United Colors of Plutonium, and they wrote a soundtrack song for that. And some of them are instrumental, some of them are not. Miss Sarajevo was the single which they did with Pavarotti, Luciano Pavarotti, and I mean they released a live video of that. I think Miss Sarajevo might be a real movie. Number 9, Ghost in the Shell. That's a real movie as well, of course, an animated movie. For me, song number 3, Your Blue Room. That's an amazing song, and for me, that stands in a very different way. It stands with any U2, single or hit from throughout the years. It's not a pop song in the same way as, whatever In the Name of Love or whatever other ones they might have, Beautiful Day. But it's a really I don't know, it's a nice song. He his vocal against the production of the vocal that I like in this period. I can't really describe it more than that. I'm trying to find the words to it, but I can't. But it's an interesting album. It's not definitely not something you listen and you find, think, oh, that's a catchy song, or this is that. It's something kind of like it's a slow burn. It wasn't as successful as their other albums, as of course. I think it's the lowest selling album of their career. It says music by Brian Eno, Bono, Adam Clayton, The Edge, Larry Mullen Jr. So they're acknowledging it's the the members of U2. They're featuring some guests, Pavarotti, Howie B, Holly, but it's not a U2 release. These are both secondhand, by the way. uh, this was $2, I remember. Zooropa, I got that. I think that was $3 or $4, so a little bit more expensive than the ones I usually talk about here. But so here on the liner notes, they talk about the films, these invented movies that don't exist. Some of them do, but most of them don't. So kind of create an image of for the music which they're writing for. Um, so yeah, I think for a band that at this time were one of the biggest bands in the world, um, I think that's a pretty brave and creative idea. Obviously, culture is so different now that you don't really have this idea of the biggest band in the world, but this kind of thing wouldn't be common. I think that people kind of underestimate and look past a lot of the things that U2 did. They just see the typical images and ideas of U2, and they don't think about they really did push things for themselves, for their place as such a huge band. They did try to push things in new directions. Maybe that sometimes it seemed they got scared, or they kind of gave up too soon. And that's how I felt when they got to the 2000s with some of the music they did then. They just kind of just fell back into a pattern and then kind of didn't move out of that pattern for over a decade. Um, but yeah, I truly appreciate this period of U2. The Achtung Baby, Zooropa, Passengers, and Pop to an extent. I think 90s U2 is my favorite U2, which I know might be like anathema, but but it's true. And if not 90s, then the 80s. Certainly not past the 2000s. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, just a kind of a look at one little slice period of U2's career that I appreciate and recommend. Thanks for watching.